Owning a luxury car is a status symbol. It tells the world you have wealth and taste, and you're not afraid to show it. The world's rarest, most exclusive, and most expensive cars are traded for more money than most of us pay for our homes. When you've made such an investment in a vehicle, the idea that you'd walk away and leave it behind one day seems crazy. But it happens much more often than you'd imagine. There are many reasons someone might abandon a luxury car. So, let's find out the stories behind some of the most astonishing abandoned vehicles we've ever seen. When urban explorers investigated an old abandoned country house in Surrey, England, they found a real shock waiting for them in the barn, gathering dust. A vintage 1929 racing Bentley, the same make and model that used to result in regular wins for Great Britain in the 24-hour Le Mans endurance race, had been hiding there ever since 1985. It was originally bought by the grandfather of the property's last owner in the 1930s. Only around 1,800 of these cars were ever built between 1927 and 1930, and most of them have long since rusted away to nothing. The car was sent to auction, where an expert who surveyed it said that finding a Bentley of this kind in such good condition was the equivalent of finding a new painting by Rembrandt. Its estimated value to collectors is more than $400,000. Buying a Ferrari is the ultimate dream for many people. So, how did this one come to be rotting away under the hot sun in the grasslands of Ibadan, Nigeria? This isn't any old Ferrari. It's one of the limited edition F50 range. 349 F50s, which are recognized as the last road car with an F1 engine, were built to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Ferrari in 1995. They almost never appear on the open market, and they're so valuable to collectors that when one does become available, the price can go as high as $2 million. This poor abandoned F50 looks like it's suffered in the sun, but it's still intact. Hopefully, somebody can restore it to its former beauty. These two classic vintage cars narrowly avoided an accidental date with a demolition ball. The beautiful duo, a 1966 Ferrari 275 GTB2 and a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427, have been sat in the barn of an abandoned house since 1991. The barn sits on dilapidated land in a wealthy area and was scheduled to be destroyed to make way for new housing. But fortunately, someone decided to have a look inside first. Both vehicles have less than 20,000 miles on the clock each, and insurers believe their combined value exceeds $4 million. The Cobra, in particular, is a rare build, with its 427 racing engine instead of the standard 428. They're a little dusty, but apart from that, they'd been perfectly protected from the elements, and the engines of both cars started up at the first time of asking. They're now in the hands of private collectors. Rotting away in a field surrounded by goats, this is an undignified end for a Lamborghini Diablo. The luxury supercars were in production for many years, with a run that started in 1900 and ended in 2001. But only 2,884 were created in total. The rest of them all surely enjoyed better fates than this forgotten specimen, which, aside from being abandoned, has also been coated in blue paint for reasons unknown. Who would drive such a spectacular car into a field and leave it there for the goats to admire? We may never know the answers, but we hope someone will come forward and take care of it. The Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren is a supercar of excellent pedigree. It's a product of a time when Mercedes owned a stake in the British McLaren Group, and the two glamorous companies worked together to make incredible cars like this one, with a 5.5-liter V8 engine. Sadly, this dusty and weathered model may never move again. It's in a police lockup in the Czech Republic, where it's been impounded since 2011, after its owner was implicated in a complicated legal investigation. It can't be sold or otherwise moved on until the legal matter is dealt with. And so far, it's been going on for years. Surely there's somewhere better to store it than out in the open where it started to rust. To the untrained eye, this is just a broken down wreck of a car with a full hedge growing out of the hood. But in its prime, it was a complete one-off. You're looking at the shell of a 1967 Shelby GT500. But back when it had someone to care for it, cosmetic work was performed to upgrade it to a 68 model as a promotional aid for a local car dealership in Cumming, Georgia, USA. The dealership is long gone now, and the car has simply been abandoned. It's been parked in this field for more than 20 years, where time and nature have torn it apart. Some of the cars on our list could be restored with enough money and time, but it's probably too late for this one. In a secret location in Russia, a whole fleet of Marussia supercars has been abandoned in the open, slowly being taken for scrap piece by piece. The worst thing about it is that they've never even been driven. Marussia was supposed to be the luxury car manufacturer of the future, making exclusive F2 and coupe models. Pre-orders had been taken on some of the fleet with retail prices upwards of $100,000. They never made it as far as reaching sale. Marussia went bankrupt in 2014. And everything on the production line was left behind with the company closed. Some of these are one-of-a-kind concept cars, utterly unique in the world. What a senseless loss. It's starting to feel like there's at least one example of all Ferrari's models abandoned out in the wild somewhere. This is a Ferrari Daytona Spider, built in the 1970s, and it's been gathering dirt and dust half hidden in grassland. A pristine condition 1971 Spider can be worth more than $500,000. It looks like at least some effort has been made to hide the vehicle, but it's evident from the state of decay that it hasn't moved for some time. The windows and frame are still intact, and the interior of the car looks present and correct too. How did it get here? Why has nobody ever returned for it? Old country estates in Britain make great hunting grounds for forgotten classic cars. Some filmmakers, searching for a perfect location for a photo shoot, stumbled across this warehouse full of ultra-rare Land Rovers. There are millions of Land Rovers out in the world, but hardly any like these. Within the collection, buried under years of dust, is one of the first lightweight Land Rovers the manufacturers ever built, completed in December 1968. It's never been taxed, never been out on the road, and barely moved at all in 50 years. Other highlights include what might be the last known surviving Schmidt Unimog snowblower and prototype airport support vehicles, including a Land Rover cherry picker made from a modified Land Rover 110 model. This story has a happy ending. All of the vehicles have been rescued and are currently being restored. Formula One racing teams invest millions of dollars into their cars, making sure they're at the cutting edge of speed and technology. Each season, technology moves on and new cars are built, meaning the older ones are surplus to requirements. So, where do they go? Often they end up in the hands of wealthy private collectors. Somebody in France built up an incredible collection over the years and then left it all to go to rack and ruin. There are former racing cars from the Lotus, Ferrari, and Renault teams here, along with a Benetton that dates back to the Schumacher era. But the paint is fading and moss has grown through the engines. Nobody knows how these incredible cars came to be forgotten about in this way. Bugatti has been making luxury cars ever since the company opened its doors, and the Bugatti Type 22 Brescia Roadster is an excellent early example of their work. This one may no longer look its best, but There's a fascinating story behind it. It spent 73 years at the bottom of a lake in Switzerland when its former owner decided to scrap it instead of paying a tax bill. The vehicle was a custom order, built in 1925 with a 1.5-liter engine and a top speed of over 100 miles per hour, which was incredible for its time. French Grand Prix legend René Dreyfus used to own it, but he lost it in a drunken game of poker to Swiss socialite Adalbert Baudet. By 1935, it was underwater. Divers brought it back to the surface in 2009, and it sold to a California collector the following year to exhibit in a museum. Even in its badly damaged state, it cost its new owner $370,000. There's a certain irony in opening a museum to exhibit old and abandoned cars, and then abandoning the museum. But that's precisely what happened inside an old warehouse in Japan. The public was once welcome to come in and inspect the rare car collection themselves. But now, the museum and its remaining collection are forgotten. Inside, still in reasonable condition, are some real collector's items from Chrysler and Ford. A Chrysler from 1901 is probably the most fantastic find, although there's also an old T-model Ford with wooden wheels, and a Mercedes-Benz 220S with the beautiful velour interior still present and the radio still intact. The Mercedes in particular looks like it could still be driven away if someone took the time to inflate the tires. If someone can open the doors to that abandoned museum, we have another entry for it. A Ferrari 456 GT that's been parked up and abandoned on the back streets of Tokyo. The personal effects of the owner are still inside, which makes it an even more puzzling discovery. The decaying paintwork suggests that it's been out in the open for a few years, with plants beginning to work their way into the bodywork, and a thick coat of rust on the brakes. The unusual design of the spokes suggests this was a custom order, and could be worth more than the $80,000 guide price this model usually attracts. The 6-speed manual gearbox is also likely a custom inclusion. These vehicles usually came with a 4-speed auto. Somebody once loved and cared for this Ferrari. So where are they now? The Jaguar XJ220 is one of the rarest big cats of them all. Only 282 were produced between 1992 and 1994. And 15 years later, they regularly fetch prices of more than $500,000 when they come up for sale. They're both collector's items and investments, and will continue to grow in value as time passes. How, then, has one come to be discarded on a back street in Qatar, covered in debris and detritus? To make matters worse, an expert has tracked it back to its last known sale and confirmed that it went from pristine condition to its current state in 6 short years. Photographs have been taken through the car's window, showing that there are only 560 miles on the clock. It was bought, it was hardly used, and now it languishes in a forgotten and abandoned desert road. What a waste! Many of us who love cars dream of buying an old classic and restoring them. That was the motivation of the owner of this parking lot in Manhattan, New York. He purchased 3 classic cars in the hope of making them beautiful once more. But 40 years passed, and he never found the time. For that entire time, the cars waited in the darkness. The super rare cars are a 1937 Packard Hearse, 1937 custom-built Rolls-Royce, which was once in the service of the British government, and a 1938 Delahaye convertible, which won the Best in Show award at the Brussels Motor Show in 1948. The vehicles now have a new owner, and it's hoped that restoration work can finally begin. 40 years late. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.